Hey guys, welcome to Christianish. This is the podcast for women who have Bibles but lack boundaries. My name is Keshia. I am a dating coach and hypnotherapist. I help women learn how to heal from their unhealthy relationship patterns so that they can attract healthy relationships in which they feel loved, supported, and cherished. And one of the things that I get from clients all the time is how do they navigate their faith when it comes to dealing with modern dating? Now, in my case, one of the many things that I studied in college was religion. And I'm Christian, but I work with women who are Christian, who are Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, even the more spiritual woo girlies. I have some of them as my clients. And no matter what your belief system is, being able to incorporate that into your relationships and into your dating is so important. Because if this is something that is truly a value to you, just like anything else that is a value with you, then you want those values to align with your future partner. One of the things that I'm always telling my clients is that, yes, it's great to have interest in common, to like kind of the same music and hobbies and that sort of thing. But having those things in common pales in comparison to having common values. There's been multiple studies that show that common values are a better indicator of relationship success than common interest. So, because of that, if you are a woman of faith, it is so important that you find someone who shares your faith and believes it to the extent that you do. So, again, we're going to talk about ways that you can navigate your faith while dealing with modern dating. And again, because I am Christian, I will be using some Bible verse references in this video or in this podcast episode. I don't know if you're listening on the podcast or watching this on YouTube, but I do want to make clear that one of the things that I truly believe is that the Bible is not just some magical text, but that it is common sense advice for practical living. So I'm also very careful about choosing verses that relate to anyone, no matter what your faith or belief is. So take it as a quote if you need to. So first things first, there is so much talk on social media about women needing to decenter men. And while I think the concept of that is a good idea, too often the way I see it applied is applied badly, frankly. And what I mean by that is instead of centering other things and making those other things the focus of your life, too often I see decenter men as an excuse to man bash, to hate on men, to talk about how men are trash. And don't get me wrong, I had my fair share of bad dating experiences. We could do multiple podcast episodes on those. But at the same time, I have a husband who is great to me, who is supportive, who is loving. And, not just in my own marriage, but I see in other people's marriages the value of partnership and how when you find a partner who is truly aligned with you and your purpose, it does so much to help you elevate your life. So, yes, we shouldn't make a romantic partner the center of our lives, but there's nothing wrong with desiring a partner. So that brings me to my first point when we're talking about navigating faith and dating, and that is to center God, center your faith to start with. So what that means is, and I have notes, so if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see me looking down. But this means that, you pray about your relationships. This means seeking wisdom from, your higher power, from God, from your beliefs, and making sure that your values align with your faith. So there's a verse, Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And basically, the purpose of this verse is telling us that when we put our faith and our values first, truly, when we live a life of integrity, then everything else comes into our lives more easily. The money, the relationships, the career, all of that. When we live a life that is in line with our values, our integrity, our faith, then the other things become so much easier. And this is one of the things that I see so often growing up as a preacher's kid and as a church girl. There's so much emphasis in a lot of religions on the patriarchy. And again, even with clients I have that are more law of attraction, woo, all of that, there's so much in the manifestation community about looking for your specific person. And all of these different belief systems put for women finding a man at the top of the value chain. And again, there's nothing wrong with desiring a partner. I wouldn't be a dating coach if I didn't believe that there was value in desiring a partner. But at the same time, no other person is ever going to be your end all be all. And no other person can help root you, ground you the way that your faith can. As much as I love my husband, he's also human, right? So if I put all of my faith and trust into him, another human being, of course, I would find myself to be disappointed time and time again. So having this faith and being able to make that your priority and to ground yourself in that first keeps you more level-headed, makes it so much easier to proceed in dating. Now, that brings me to the second point, which is centering yourself as well. You cannot expect another person to be responsible for your happiness. Instead, the man that you date, the man that you marry should add to your happiness. He should be the cherry on top, someone that you share your joys with. And then, yes, when you have setbacks, when you have disappointments, someone who can help you ease those burdens as well. But you should already have a happy and fulfilled life. And what I mean by that is you should have hobbies. You should have interests. You should have a social life and friends. And then when this person comes into your life, again, they add to all of these things. One, you don't ever want another human being to be your source, but also it just makes you more attractive. I did a video on my YouTube channel a couple of days ago on how to make a man miss you. And one of the things that I was saying in that video was that it's not about playing games and being manipulative, but one of the things that you should do is have your own life, because when you have your own life, you're not desperately waiting by the phone. And that desperate energy is a turnoff. When you show that you have your own life, that you have your own interests, someone is going to come into your life. They're going to see all these things that you have going on, and they're going to say, oh, wow, she has such an interesting life. She's such an interesting person. I really love talking to her because of all the things that she does. I want to be a part of that. I want to add to that. So yes, we want to learn how to center God. We want to learn how to center ourselves and never trust on another human being to be our source. Now, the third thing, the third tip for incorporating your faith into modern dating is to learn how to set boundaries. And I am huge on boundaries. And one of the things that I want to make clear is that boundaries are never about punishing another person. They're never about making other people behave a certain way. Boundaries are completely about you. Boundaries are what are the things that need to be in place so that I can be the best person to me. I can be the best mother, daughter, sister, cousin, friend, coworker, employee, employer, any of those things. Boundaries are the conditions that need to be set in your other relationships so that you can be, again, the best you can to other people, and so that you can love yourself to the brim and that you can love other people out of that overflow. One of the boundaries that I talk about all the time is sleep. I used to be a full-time journalist, and when I was working in news full-time, I worked the night shift. So I had a very hard boundary about not taking phone calls after a certain amount of time so that I could get enough hours of sleep. And yes, that's about me being good for me, taking care of my health, taking care of my mental well-being. But also it benefited my other relationships, because if I wasn't on phone calls sleepy, then someone talking to me had my full attention. I could be present in the moment. I could listen better. I could engage better. I could be more interesting. So again, it's not just about making our relationships with ourselves better, but making our relationships with others better. Talking about faith, it made my relationship with God better too, because I wasn't like praying half sleep, right? So setting boundaries allows us to live out of the overflow. And when you set these boundaries, you have to remember that if you don't define your limits, somebody else will. We teach other people how to treat us. So it is so important that we set these boundaries so that people know how best to love us. Now, number 3 is watching out for red flags. And this kind of goes back to the first tip about centering God and centering your faith. Because when you center your faith, when you are regularly in prayer, in meditation, all of that, and you are getting clear on what your values are and how your values fit in with your faith, then it makes it so much easier to understand what your standards are, and then to take those standards and then realize, okay, if these are my standards, what are the red flags that I should be watching out in a relationship? So you want to make sure that you're dealing with someone who respects the boundaries that you set and doesn't try to test them. Back to that whole idea of me setting a boundary about sleep. I remember dating this one guy who I would tell him, hey, I had various work schedules. So I would tell him, hey, at that time, I didn't accept phone calls past, I believe it was like 7 p.m. That was the latest that I could go to bed and still get a decent amount of sleep. And he would say, okay, I can't call you past that time. But he would constantly wait a few minutes after that time to send me a text message to see if I would respond. And that was his way of testing that boundary, to see if I would answer back and then hop on the phone with him. And then he could be like, well, I didn't call you past that time. I just texted to see if you were awake. And then you happened to be awake. So, we went ahead and talked. But it's little things like that. Those just little needles into your boundaries that you need to watch out for. You also want to look out for someone whose faith is more talk and less walk. This is something that I work with my clients with all the time, because they will tell me that they want to be with someone who is of the same faith as them. And this person will say that they are, but then they aren't living a life according to the values that my client has. And, it can be very difficult when you are a woman of faith, because if you look at Christianity, for example, there are people who are Catholic, there are people who are Protestant. If you look at people who are Protestant, there's 50 million different denominations, right? And that can be difficult because people can say that they are Christian, but Christian is such a wide spectrum. I think the same thing with Islam as well. There's different sects of Islam, so those values can be different. And then with people who are spiritual, with people who are Jewish, if you are Hindu, for example, even all these things, you can have someone who grew up with a certain faith or a certain religion, and they may still kind of identify, but they're not practicing as much. If you are strong in your faith and it is really important to you, you may find that someone who, again, back to Christianity, who says they're Christian, but they're only a CME, they go to church Christmas, Mother's Day, Easter, you may find that difficult to be in a relationship with a person like that. So you have to be very clear on, what does it mean when you say that you want someone who is of a certain faith, of a certain belief? And also you want to see how they walk it. You can innocently ask someone, hey, how do you spend your Sundays? And get an answer about how they feel about church, for example. But you want to make sure that this person is living the things that they say. And then another red flag is that this person pressures you to compromise your values. So, Proverbs 4:23 says, guard your heart above all else, because it determines the course of your life. And again, back to this idea of, the Bible being instructions for practical living. One of the things that I like about that particular verse is just this whole idea of, if we don't guard our hearts, if we don't hold firm to our boundaries and to our standards, once you start to let one thing go, you start to let so many other things go. And then you find yourself in the spiral where you realize you're in a situation that doesn't fit at all with your faith, with your life, with your purpose, with the direction that you saw things going for your life. And it's really so important that we learn to hold those standards. So, you have to understand that when you focus on having these standards and your ideals in mind, it makes dating so much easier, because then you have this thing guiding your discernment so that you can quickly dismiss people who are not right for you, and you can focus your time on someone who is right for you. And that brings me to the fifth and final point for navigating our faith and dating. And that is attracting a partner who shares your values. So one of the things that I have my clients do when we first start working together is to make a love list. And I'm very specific on the instructions that I have for this love list, but in general, it is a list of just the things that you want in a partner. And after I have them go through a process of refining that list and honing in on some key areas and everything, then I tell them, hey, the things that are on your love list, how do you align with those? How are you either also that thing? So, for example, you want someone who is financially stable. Are you yourself financially stable? Or how are you the complement to that? You want someone who is giving and generous, but you have trouble receiving. That's not going to be a good match. You're going to need to work on your ability to receive compliments, receive gifts, and not feel guilty about it if you want someone who is giving. So instead of chasing after a certain relationship or chasing after love, you want to become the type of person that you're trying to attract. Or, like I said, in the case of like giving and receiving, the complement to the type of person that you want to attract. And you want to make sure that you are walking in your purpose, because if someone comes along and you two are aligned with your faith, with your values, and all of that, and he is actively working on his purpose and his ambitions and his goals, he's not going to want someone who's not doing the same. So you want to make sure that both of you are equally yoked in that matter. So when you focus on becoming the best version of yourself, it becomes so much easier to draw in someone who is going to be attracted to you and who is going to love you and cherish you the way that you deserve. So that's it for today. If you want help with learning how to make that love list, how to refine your values, get clear on what it is that you want in a relationship, and learning how to embody that so that you can naturally attract a great partner, I do have spots open for one-on-one clients right now. So I will put the link in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you are listening to this on the podcast, then I will have it in the show notes for you. But in the meantime, I love you so much. And, keep your hearts open, keep your standards high. Talk to you soon. Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.